The funeral flowers were still fresh, their heavy, sweet scent clinging to my clothes like a persistent nightmare, when my phone vibrated in my palm. We had just buried Thomas. I was sitting in the quiet kitchen of our home, trying to understand how a completely healthy man could simply slip away in his sleep. My name is Vanessa Evans. I am 35 years old, and until 3 days ago, I thought I had the perfect life. But during the reception, something felt terribly off. My stepmother, Evelyn, and my younger sister, Chloe, weren't crying. Instead, they hovered around Thomas's desk, asking probing questions about his final corporate affairs and whether he had updated his life insurance policy. Their sudden, aggressive interest in his assets made my stomach twist with a cold, sickening dread. Then came the call. The screen showed Arthur Vance, Thomas's billionaire employer, a man who usually moved in circles far above ours. When I answered, his voice wasn't his usual commanding corporate tone. It was a terrified whisper. "Vanessa, listen to me very carefully," he hissed, the panic raw and undeniable. "I found something hidden in your husband's private digital accounts. You need to come to my high-rise office right now. Drive alone." Before I could even speak, he delivered a line that froze the blood in my veins. "And whatever you do, do not tell your sister or your stepmother. Don't look at them, don't text them. If they know you're coming here, your life is in immediate danger. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached." My hands shook so violently that I could barely slide the car key into the ignition. Arthur's warning echoed in my mind like a ticking time bomb as I backed out of the driveway. Every instinct screamed at me to look back at the house, where Evelyn and Chloe were still supposedly looking through Thomas's paperwork in the study. I didn't look. I just forced my eyes onto the road ahead, shifting into drive and accelerating into the late afternoon traffic of the city. The drive to the Vance corporate headquarters took 20 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. Every time a car slowed down behind me, my heart leapt into my throat. I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see my sister's sleek sedan or my stepmother's luxury SUV tailing me through the intersections. Paranoid thoughts swirled in my head, mixing with the raw, heavy grief of losing Thomas. Why would my own family pose a threat to me? What could Thomas possibly have possessed that a billionaire would find terrifying? When I finally pulled into the gleaming underground parking garage of the corporate high-rise, the silence of the concrete structure felt heavy, almost suffocating. I stepped out of my vehicle, gripping my purse tight against my chest like a shield. Walking toward the executive elevator, I felt entirely alone in the world, holding on to the fragile, shattered pieces of the life I had known just days ago. I pressed the button for the restricted penthouse suite, and as the doors sealed shut, the elevator began its rapid, silent ascent. The elevator doors glided open with a soft chime, revealing the vast, dark expanse of the penthouse floor. The receptionist's desk was completely abandoned, and the only light illuminating the shadows came from beneath the heavy oak doors of Arthur Vance's private office. Taking a deep breath to steady my shaking knees, I crossed the marble floor and pushed the doors open, fully expecting to see the billionaire boss sitting alone behind his desk. Instead, I froze, instantly. Standing right beside Arthur was a tall, stern-faced man in a tailored dark suit, holding a forensic scanner, whom Arthur introduced as a high-level corporate investigator. Before I could even ask what was happening, Arthur stepped past me, closed the massive office doors, and turned the heavy deadbolt with a decisive click that seemed to echo through the quiet room. He then pointed toward a sleek, heavily encrypted laptop sitting open on the glass conference table. "Vanessa, your husband hid this laptop inside our company's private secure servers just 48 hours before he passed away," Arthur said, his voice dropping to a low, solemn pitch that sent a fresh wave of chills down my spine. The investigator leaned forward, adjusting the screen to show a complex web of medical data and digital code. Thomas didn't die from a sudden medical anomaly, Vanessa. He was systematically and deliberately poisoned over the course of several weeks, and the forensic digital evidence he left behind points directly to someone living inside your own household. The corporate investigator pulled up a series of financial records on the glowing screen, and as I read the names listed, the room began to spin. There were bank statements, wire transfers, and newly altered life insurance policies, all heavily in debt to dangerous offshore lending entities. Evelyn and Chloe's names were printed at the top of every single page. The investigator pointed to a digital log showing a massive, systematic fraud operation that had been running quietly under the radar for nearly a year. Your stepmother and sister were using your personal identification, your forged signatures, and your domestic access to siphon millions of dollars out of our secondary corporate accounts. Arthur Vance explained, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and deep pity. They were drowning financially, Vanessa, and they used you as their shield to absorb the entire legal liability. Thomas had stumbled entirely by accident onto the illegal scheme when reviewing an automated internal audit. He had immediately begun compiling this secure, hidden information to protect me from being framed for their massive corporate theft. But he hadn't been fast enough to save himself. The investigator pulled up a final entry, an encrypted pharmacy purchase record linked directly to Chloe's private credit card. They had realized Thomas knew everything, and they killed him to ensure his absolute silence before he could present the evidence to the authorities. I gripped the edge of the glass table as a sickening wave of grief and rage washed over me. My own family hadn't just betrayed me financially. They had stolen the love of my life. They think they got away with it, Arthur Vance said, his gaze fixed on the glowing monitor. Evelyn and Chloe believe they successfully wiped every single trace of their fraudulent activity and the poison research from Thomas's personal phone and laptop right after he died. They have absolutely no idea that this secure company server exists, or that Thomas automatically backed up every piece of incriminating data to our private cloud database the very night he realized what they were doing. The investigator leaned closer, his expression intense and focused. We could call the local authorities right now, Vanessa, but with white-collar corporate crime of this magnitude, their defense attorneys would tie this up in complex legal appeals for years. We need to catch them completely off guard, in a setting where they cannot deny their intent or shift the blame onto you. We need them to lock themselves into their own trap. Arthur reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a certified corporate asset summary document, setting it down precisely on the glass table. The official reading of Thomas's estate and his company benefits is scheduled for tomorrow morning at his lawyer's office. Your stepmother and sister are expecting to walk in there, sign a few standard inheritance releases, and walk out with millions of dollars that rightfully belong to you. He looked directly into my eyes, his tone dropping to a low, serious murmur. To ensure absolute victory, you have to return home tonight and act completely normal. Look your husband's killers directly in the eye, pretend to be a clueless, broken widow, and let them believe they have won. Can you play your part for just 12 more hours? The legal offices of Morrison & Associates were perfectly quiet when we arrived the next morning. Evelyn and Chloe walked into the polished mahogany conference room with triumphant, eager smiles plastered across their faces, fully expecting to claim my entire inheritance and the massive corporate benefits payout. They sat across from me, whispering to each other and smoothed their expensive designer dresses, completely convinced that their elaborate, deadly plan had worked. Their lawyer began sliding the standard release documents across the table, prompting me to sign away the final administration rights to Thomas's assets. I picked up the pen, letting my hand tremble just enough to keep up the appearance of a broken, vulnerable widow. Chloe smirked, leaning back in her chair as if she had already won. But before my pen could touch the paper, the heavy conference room doors swung open with a dramatic thud. Arthur Vance stepped into the room, accompanied by 2 federal authorities and the high-level corporate investigator from the night before. The triumphant smiles instantly vanished from my stepmother and sister's faces as the doors were locked behind them. The family's lawyer turned completely pale as Arthur stepped forward and placed Thomas's secure encrypted laptop directly on the center of the table. The investigator opened the system, displaying the unassailable digital forensic evidence of the systematic poisoning, the forged life insurance policies, and the hidden server data detailing their multi-million-dollar corporate fraud. Evelyn gasped, her hands shaking as she realized the trap had just snapped shut around them. The absolute proof of their horrific crimes was laid bare for everyone in the room to see. Evelyn and Chloe were arrested on the spot, their triumphant smiles twisting into frantic screams of denial as the federal authorities stepped forward and clicked the heavy steel handcuffs around their wrists. They barked desperate lies, trying to blame each other, but the cold, unassailable evidence left them absolutely no room to escape. They were led out of the conference room in complete disgrace, facing a lifetime behind bars for corporate fraud and first-degree murder. With the true, final version of Thomas's secure estate plan validated by the investigators, his actual assets were transferred entirely to me. I inherited the protected multi-million-dollar corporate payout and the secure funds, ensuring my absolute financial freedom and complete security from the wolves who had tried to destroy me. They wanted to strip me of everything, but in the end, Thomas's brilliant foresight guaranteed that his killers lost their freedom while I gained total independence. 3 months later, I sat on the deck of my beautiful new coastal home, watching the waves crash against the shore under the evening sky. The heavy grief of losing Thomas will always remain in my heart. But I finally felt a deep sense of peace knowing that absolute justice had been delivered for the love of my life. What would you do if you found out your own blood relatives were behind such a dark betrayal? Comment your thoughts below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the screen 2 other channel favorite stories that will completely surprise you. Thank you for watching.